What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Ricardo, your NBA sports journalist, and today we are getting into something that I have been wanting to talk about for a very long time, because there is a conversation happening right now in the basketball world that I think most people are getting completely wrong. And as someone who covers this league every single day, who watches the games, who reads the interviews, who follows the stories, I have a take on this that might surprise you. Everyone is talking about the excuses modern NBA players make: load management, injury reports, DNP-rest, leaving games early, not playing back-to-backs, skipping nationally televised games. And the narrative that is building around all of this is that today's NBA players are soft, that they are making excuses, that the generation of players we are watching right now does not have the toughness or the commitment of the players who came before them. And here is my honest take, as someone who covers this sport professionally. Some of that criticism is completely fair, and some of it is the most short-sighted, uninformed take in all of sports media right now. And I am going to explain both sides of this, because I think the truth is more complicated and more interesting than either camp wants to admit. Let me start with what I think the legitimate criticism actually is, because there are real examples of modern NBA behavior that are genuinely frustrating and genuinely deserve to be called out. When a star player sits out a nationally televised game against a marquee opponent while being listed as healthy on the injury report, that is a problem. Not because the player is being soft, but because fans bought tickets, fans tuned in, sponsors paid money, and the league marketed that game based on a player's participation. That is a business problem, and it is also a respect problem. You owe it to the people who showed up to play. And when load management becomes so systematic that certain star players are essentially playing 60-game seasons while their teammates are playing 80, there is a competitive fairness issue that the league genuinely has not figured out how to solve yet. If your team is built around a guy who plays 60 games and then asks his teammates to carry the load for 20 games while he rests, that has real consequences for everyone involved. The team, the city, the fans who bought season tickets to watch their guy play. Those criticisms are fair. I stand by them. There are modern NBA players who have absolutely used the new culture of player empowerment and injury management as cover for not wanting to compete on certain nights. That is real, and I am not going to pretend it is not. But here is where the conversation goes completely off the rails, and where I genuinely push back on the loudest voices making the excuse argument. The idea that old-school NBA players were tougher because they played through everything, because they never missed games, because they never complained about injuries, is one of the biggest myths in sports history. And I say this as a journalist who has done the research. Those players were not playing through injuries because they were tougher. They were playing through injuries because they had no choice, because the culture, the contracts, the collective bargaining agreements, and the medical understanding of the sport in that era gave them essentially zero power to protect themselves. If you did not play, you did not get paid in a lot of those older contracts. If you said your knee hurt, the team doctor, who worked for the team, not for you, would tell you it was fine and you would go out there. If you sat out, you got called soft by your coach in front of the media and your roster spot was in jeopardy. That is not toughness. That is coercion. And we celebrated it as toughness for decades without thinking about what it actually meant for those players' bodies and their lives after basketball. We are now living in an era where we understand what repeated head trauma does to a human brain, where we understand what playing on bone spurs and torn ligaments and inflamed tendons for years does to a person's quality of life at 50, 60, 70 years old, where the science of load management and recovery and soft tissue injury prevention is actually sophisticated enough to make a real difference in how long and how well these athletes can perform. And the response from a large portion of the fan base and the media is, stop making excuses and just play. Think about what we are actually asking. We are asking multi-million-dollar athletes to ignore the best available medical science, to risk their long-term health and quality of life, to potentially shorten their careers because we want to watch them play on a Tuesday night in February against a lottery team. That is the honest version of the stop making excuses argument. And when you say it out loud like that, it sounds a lot less like a tough love take and a lot more like fans prioritizing their entertainment over another human being's well-being. Now, here is where Ricardo's take gets nuanced, because I am not saying every single DNP rest is justified. I am not saying load management has never been abused. I am not saying players should be able to sit out games whenever they feel like it with zero accountability. There absolutely needs to be a system. There needs to be transparency, and there needs to be a baseline level of commitment to the product that fans and sponsors deserve. But what I am saying is that when we use the word excuses to describe players who are making informed decisions about their health and longevity, we are being intellectually dishonest about what was actually happening in previous eras and what the real cost of the old way was. Joel Embiid just played a Game 7 3 weeks after appendix surgery. He dropped 34 points and drew 14 fouls. And people celebrated it as proof that he is different, that he is tougher, that he is the kind of player who shows up when it matters. And they are right. It was extraordinary. But do you know what else it was? It was a medical risk. It was a man competing at the highest level while his body was still recovering from actual surgery. We should celebrate his will and his performance. But we should also recognize that in that same moment, if Embiid had decided his body was not ready and he had sat out Game 7, the narrative would have been completely different. People would have called it an excuse. They would have said he let his team down. They would have questioned his toughness. And that is the double standard at the heart of this whole conversation. We celebrate players when they play through pain, and we criticize them when they protect themselves. We want it both ways. We want players to be warriors when it suits the narrative, and then we want to call them soft when they make the medically sound decision. That is the pathetic part of this story. Not the players making excuses. The fans and media demanding that athletes sacrifice their bodies for our entertainment and then acting morally superior about it. Now, am I saying the players are completely blameless? No. There is a real problem with accountability and communication in modern player culture around availability. Players owe their teams, their fans, and the league a higher standard of transparency. If you are healthy enough to practice, you should be healthy enough to play. If you are sitting out for rest, say it is rest and own it publicly. Do not hide behind vague injury designations. Do not let your team manage the message while you avoid the accountability. That is a fair demand. Transparency, ownership, clear communication, not martyrdom, not playing through torn ACLs, just honest adult communication about what is happening and why. The NBA is the most talented it has ever been. The athleticism, the skill level, the basketball IQ of the average player in this league right now is historically high. These players are incredible, and they deserve to be treated like professionals who can make informed decisions about their own health, not like entertainers who exist purely to perform whenever the audience demands it. That is the take. That is where I stand. Modern NBA players are not making pathetic excuses. Some of them are making smart decisions. Some of them are abusing a system that needs better structure. And most of the people criticizing them loudest have never had to think about what it means to play through real physical pain for the entertainment of millions, while the long-term damage accumulates quietly in their joints and their minds. I am Ricardo, your NBA sports journalist, and that is my honest take. If you agree, smash that like button. If you disagree, drop a comment below because I genuinely want to have this conversation with this community. Subscribe to the channel for daily NBA and WNBA coverage, and I will see you in the next one.